Alright, so this last weekend I played my Mist Valley Ninja deck at the Tinley Park Regionals, and I lost on the bubble, which is really frustrating. I had it, and then I just totally messed up in the ninth round. So I ended up going 6-3. I was about 60th place, I think. If I would have won the last round, I would have been somewhere between 10th and 30th. That's where everybody who was 7-2 finished. So I almost topped. It was really close. So the deck itself was really amazing. I totally should have topped, and this is definitely, in my opinion, the best deck of the format if you don't consider the Duelist Alliance decks. I think Shadows and Burning Abyss are a little bit better than this, but since this has a good matchup against Shadows, you should probably beat that deck most times you play it. So the only deck you really have to worry about is Burning Abyss. And pretty much every other deck, this deck is just better than their deck, so you're going to win most other games you play. So to start off with, I'm going to be going through how my cards did specifically, and then I'll be doing a round by round overview of how my tournament went. So I'm not really going to explain how the deck works in this video because it's almost the same exact build as my previous deck profile. So instead I'm going to be including a link to that deck profile down in the description below. I encourage you to watch that if you are interested in how this deck runs. Right now I'm going to talk more about how the cards individually performed. So Apex Avian, as you would expect, was a beast and a big part of my deck success. It actually was a little bit difficult to get it to stick on the field sometimes because my opponents were just going all out to try to get rid of it. But usually in the process of them getting it off the field, I ended up gaining an edge in terms of momentum or card advantage. So it put me ahead anyways. Mist Valley Falcon was huge. Just it by itself, bouncing my own cards back to reuse them was a big part of my deck success. Hanzo is obviously the key player in my deck, and I would usually have 2 Hanzo summons on my first 2 turns. That was the norm because I have 3 Rotas and 3 Hanzos. It was extremely consistent to get to him. A lot of times my opponents would be able to stop 1, but then the second one would resolve successfully. I remember one game actually, I believe it was against the Teller Knights in the last round. I summoned 3 Hanzos. The first 2 he had a response for, but then I think they were both MSTs to stop them actually. And then the third one finally went through, and that just put me in a big lead. Upstart Golden Ninja was really good. I only used its effect once, maybe twice, the entire tournament, but it was just a level 4 ninja, and that was really important to have. In every matchup besides Shadows, I cited him out against Shadows. So he's a little bit beneficial to have his effect. I would still think he's better than the other ninjas you could play, because I did use it like once, I think, but usually you just want him because he's a level 4 ninja. And then Sazank was okay. I resolved his effect like 2 or 3 times. I cited him out about half the time. And then Zephyros, I used his effect like once, I think. I cited him out a couple times. He was decent, but it wasn't really critical. Roto was insane. This was just came up huge for me all tournament long. Usually I searched Hanzo. I think I searched Upstart once, and I never searched for DD Warrior Lady. But this just going into Hanzo, this is huge. Duality is crazy. I think I had a dead duality once where I wasn't able to play it because I needed to keep special summoning. So it's very rarely dead. I drew multiples of it a couple times, but that was fine. I just played them on separate turns. So the field spell and terraforming, this is actually a change. I cut 2 MSTs for 1 terraforming and 1 wiretap. That was a good change in my opinion. The fact that I didn't have MST main deck hurt me once. There was one round where it hurt me. In all the other rounds, I was glad that I made the change. I only got the field spell up a handful of times, but it was really good when I got it out. Unless my opponent... There was one time where I got my field spell out, and my opponent had the MST for the transformation. And so it was a dead card at first, but later in the game I got my Apex Avian out, and then I was in a winning position because I already had the field spell ready to go. Part of the reason I didn't see these as often is because I sided them out a lot. The main reason for this is my opponent is much more likely to have MST games 2 and 3 than they are game 1. And MST shuts down the transformation card, which hurts my deck's consistency in terms of getting Apex Avian out immediately. So having this without an Apex Avian is having a -1 pretty much. So you don't want to do that if your opponent's playing MST. That's actually, I'll probably cut these when Cliffords come out because MST will be main decked a lot more with those out. And Soul Charge was huge, the best card in my deck. I won pretty much every single time I drew this, I think. There were a few games I won just because I drew this. It was just completely devastating. Transformation was really good. Got MST'd a few times. There was one point where my opponent chained Monarch Storm 4th to this, and then that ruined my play. But overall it was good, and I mean, this is half of your deck's engine. Hanzo plus this into these guys. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious that you would need 3 of this. Call of the Haunted was amazing. I got to reuse this so many times with Falcon, and it put me into winning positions by bringing out Apex Avian. This was one of the strongest cards in my deck during the tournament. And then 3 Fiendish Chain. This really came up big in a lot of matchups. The fact that it prevented my opponent's monsters from attacking was really helpful. I was able to stop Goyo Guardian. I played against Malefics once, and this was really good against them. Just allow me to stall, basically. And I did manage to abuse this with Mist Valley Falcon to get some wins that way, just by looping Fiendish Chains to prevent my opponent from doing anything. Vanity's was really good, as you would expect. There was a few matches where I won just by flipping over Vanity's and my opponent couldn't play. Warning was great every time I drew it. I don't think I ever regretted playing this. And then Compulse was solid, though it was probably the worst trap I ended up playing in terms of actual performance, but it wasn't bad by any means. And then I'm glad I ended up playing the 1 Karma Cut in addition to the 3 Phoenix Wing Wind Blasts. There was only a few times the whole tournament where the discard put me at a disadvantage. Usually I was able to discard the Apex Avian for that, or some other card that I didn't really need. And these 2 chapters are just really good right now. And then 3 Wiretap, like I said earlier, the 3rd one coming in place of one of the mystical space typhoons. And this trap was pretty big the whole tournament, wiretapping other people's wiretaps and letting my plays go through by wiretapping their traps whenever they try to stop me. So this card was really good. I don't think there's anything that I would actually change in my main deck. I really liked how it ran. And then for my side deck, I sided DD Warrior Lady a few times. I sided this in against CHATEAUs and a few other rogue matches. I ended up resolving it a couple times. It wasn't really critical, but it was okay. The 2 MSTs were really good. I ended up going up against somebody playing Royal Decree, and I needed the MST to win that game. So this was huge. I kind of wish I had room for the 3rd one, but there's not really anything I want to cut. So I don't know where I would find the room for that. I didn't end up drawing the full house ever, but I did side it in a few times. I just didn't draw it. I sided these in 1 or 2 times, I think. I think I drew Torrential once and Bottomless 0 times. I ended up just torrentially a card D, just a 1-for-1. So it was just okay. I played the magic cylinders for going into time, but I was able to avoid going into time, which is really good, because you don't want to go into time with this deck. But I did side these in against Malefics, and this ended up winning me that match. So I am glad that I played this. It ended up putting in work. And then Soul Drain and Macro I sided in a lot. Obviously Shadows and Burning Abyss, but also against rogue decks. Macrocosmos in particular won me my first match. And then Light Imprisoning was huge. It won me the match against Boojins, and it should have won me the match against the Teller Knights if I didn't mess up. So this was really good. And then Shadow Imprisoning was also really good. It was really good against Burning Abyss. So I was very happy with my side deck. The one thing, maybe change one of these 4 cards to the 3rd MST. That's something to consider doing. And then for my extra deck, I made Castel once, I think. I used it to spin a continuous Spar Trap, I think. So that was pretty good. And then Karen Gorgon I summoned multiple times. I remember summoning this against Monarchs to beat over Majesty's Fiend. So it was good because of the extra 50 attack there. I made Honor Arc at least once, I think maybe twice. And this was basically, it was the same thing I would use Castel for, except the monster was in face-up attack position with special summon, so I used 101 instead of Castel. Didn't summon Roach. I didn't summon Cowboy. I summoned EXCITON once against Boojins, and it pretty much won me that game. Didn't summon Abyss Dweller. I summoned Crazy Backs against Malefics. They were using Skill Drain. Didn't summon Excalibur. Didn't summon Heartland Draco. Didn't summon Zeraphine. Did not summon Black Ship. Did not summon Dire and Dire. I did summon Ragnar Zero against Quackimero Fire Fist, but it wasn't really important. It was just like added touch, making sure my opponent had no plays, basically. And then did not summon that. There wasn't really anything I was missing in the extra deck. I don't think there's anything I would change there. Alright, so now I'll start going round by round through the tournament to discuss how I did. So I did end up playing against a lot of rogue decks. I played actually more rogue decks than meta decks throughout the tournament. This helped a bit because I actually only had to play one Burning Abyss player, so that definitely helped. In the first round, I played against some sort of water Atlantean deck. It didn't actually play any mermails as far as I could tell, so this guy's deck was not very competitive, and this is a pretty easy win. He actually let me go first twice. He had the option to choose if he wanted to go first or second. That's something to note, actually. You want to always go first with this deck. It's definitely better. Sometimes your opponents will let you go first, not knowing that this deck really wants to go first. So, game one, he has a Gravity Bind up, and that actually starts giving me trouble because my deck isn't as focused on X-Seed monsters. But I end up summoning a Cairn Gorgon and a Vanity's Emptiness, and he tries to get out of it with an MST, but Cairn Gorgon just redirects it to his own Gravity Bind, and he can't do anything without special summoning, so I win that one. And then game two, I go first, and I open up an Apex Avian +4 extra traps, one of which was Macrocosmos, and he couldn't do anything, and I won in 3 turns. And then round two, I played against Shadows. This guy, I think, went 7-2. He was up at the top tables all day. So game one, we ended up simplifying the game state, and he summoned a Go-Yo Guardian with only, I think, 1 or 2 cards besides that, and I had to Fiendish Chain the Go-Yo to prevent it from attacking me, because it was obviously bigger than all my monsters. So I stalled until I drew a Rhoda, which I used to go for an upstart into a 101, and I took the Goyo, and the field was clear at that point, so I was able to get enough damage for game. And on the next turn, I summoned Apex Avian, and I already had Falcon out, and so I won right there. Then game 2, I drew all traps. I wasn't able to get off my Hanzo play, but I was able to stall with the traps until I was able to establish a strong field. But then the next turn, after I finally made a field, he dropped a BLS, and then he tribute summoned for Vanity's Fiend. And I did have a Fiendish chain for one of them, but I needed to be able to stop both of them, and I couldn't do that, so I lost. And by that point, I was up, I think, 3 cards in card advantage, so that was pretty rough. If he didn't have both of those monsters, I would have been able to win that. Been with Apex Avian in my hand, so I don't immediately use my ninjutsu art of transformation during my opponent's standby phase like I normally do. I'm super worried about getting my Hanzo super polyed, but that did end up happening. So he used my Hanzo to make a window, and considering that, I probably should have actually tributed my Hanzo, even though I had the Apex Avian in hand. So I would consider that a misplay on my part. And then so I have a really weak hand at this point without Hanzo, because I have 2 ninjutsu art of transformations, Call of the Haunted, Apex Avian in hand, and Mist Valley Falcon in hand. And my opponent has a window on the field, so I can't special summon twice in one turn. So I have to try to end phase Call of the Haunted for Hanzo, and then use transformation on my turn to summon the Apex Avian to attack over the window. That's really my only play. But he has MST for the end phase Call of the Haunted, and there's nothing I can do after that. My cards are totally dead at that point, and I lose pretty quickly. My opponent, round 2, was a really cool guy, and we talked multiple times after that throughout the tournament, just keeping up with how we were each doing. So at this point, I'm only 1-1, so not a good position to be in. And then round 3, I went up against Bujins. So game 1, my opponent opens up really slow. He doesn't have Yamato or anything like that, but he stalls me out with Vanity's, and then eventually he turns it off because he wants to go for Susanoo play, using mind control on my monster on the field and a normal summon Crane, but I just use Compulse to bounce my monster back to my hand. And without Vanity's on the field, the next turn I set up Apex, Avian, Falcon, Karen Gorgon, I have the field spell out, and I have Vanity's. So I have the perfect field, and there's absolutely nothing my opponent can do. What was holding me back from establishing that perfect field was the Vanity's that he turned off himself. And then game 2, I go for an EXCITON play, and I blow up everything except for the Crane that he has in hand. And I have a wiretap set, and that's the only thing I have in the field, so the wiretap assures my play goes through. Next turn, he top decks Regeki. He uses it to blow up my EXCITON, and then summons Crane to attack. But I had a Mist Valley Falcon and a trap in my hand when I blew up the field, so I'm able to just beat him down with Falcon after that, and he loses really quickly. So I ended up just blowing out this guy, and he was really salty, like the most upset I've ever seen somebody in Yu-Gi-Oh! He actually stormed off without signing the match slip. I can kind of understand it because he lost to Ninjas. Most people don't really consider that to be one of the top decks, but I mean, Bujins isn't as good as Ninjas, so he didn't have much of a chance unless he drew really well or I drew really bad. My deck's just more consistent than his is in general. I go up against Quackimero Fire Fist, and so game 1, on my second turn, I'm able to establish a field with Apex Avian, Falcon, Wiretap, and Warning, and I can just shut down all of his plays. He can't do anything. And then game 2, I use 2 Phoenix Wing Wind Blasts to clear off his board when he tries to make plays. And then I summon a Falcon, and I have a Fiendish Chain. And so after that, every time he tries to do anything, I just Fiendish Chain his monster and attack over it with Falcon. And the only thing that he had to try to stop this at all was he had the Knight, which has 2000 attack, but I had that. I don't really remember what, though. So another really easy 2-0 win. So at this point, I'm looking pretty good. And a tough 1-2 loss to Shadow deck. So then, round 5, I go up against Malefic Skill Drain, and this was a really scary matchup because, okay, game 1, his very first turn, he activates NECROVALLEY, and on my turn, he flips up Skill Drain and Soul Drain. Soul Drain doesn't do anything to me, but NECROVALLEY plus Skill Drain basically gives me almost no chance. So what I do is I Fiendish Chain his monsters to try to prevent him from attacking me, and then I make a Crazy Box because I was able to normal summon, then normal summon again. So pretty weak plays, but the Crazy Box has 3000 attack, so I attack over his monsters for a little while, but then he drops Malefic Cyber End Dragon, and I don't have any outs, and I lose. So I could tell this was going to be a problematic matchup because NECROVALLEY and Skill Drain both hurt my deck a lot. He ends up with Skill Drain again, but he doesn't have NECROVALLEY this time, and I'm able to use my Phoenix Wing Wind Blast and my other traps to keep his monsters off the field, and I push for damage as quickly as I can, and I beat him in like 4 or 5 turns just by doing beatdown with my Falcon and my Hanzo. 3, he gets NECROVALLEY up and a Skill Drain up just like in game 1. And just like game 2, I use Phoenix Wing Wind Blast to clear off his monsters and get damage in. And he actually uses Reckless Greed, which gives me 2 turns of attacks because of my Phoenix Wing Wind Blast. And so I'm able to get him down to under 2,000 life points, and I draw a one of my sided magic cylinders, and when he draws his Cyber End Dragon that I Phoenix Wing Wind Blast, he summons it, and he doesn't attack immediately. I think he's probably scared of a Dimensional Prison at this point, but I Duality into a Karma Cut, and I don't have any cards in my hand, but I set the Karma Cut, so he knows that next turn I'm going to be able to Karma Cut his Cyber End Dragon and win, because I have a monster on field. So I pretty much force him to attack into the Magic Cylinder, which ends the game. So that's my 4th win. I'm 4-1 at this point. I go up against Burning Abyss. This is the one Burning Abyss deck that I had to play against, so I was a little bit worried about this. Game 1, he goes first, and he opens 2 Mind Crushes, plus a Mathematician. So the Mathematician gets his plays going before I have a chance to set up to potentially stop the Mathematician. And the Mind Crush hits my Hanzo plus a Karma Cut, and he knows all my cards, and he has card advantage, and I get totally blown out this game. Game 2, this was kind of funny. I draw into 2 Shadow Imprisoning Mirrors, and when I activate the first one, he questions my decision to play Shadow Imprisoning Mirror because Hanzo, my main monster, is dark, but he can't do anything because I have the Shadow Imprisoning Mirror up, so he ends up MSTing it, and then I just use the second one, and I am able to grind through all of his cards pretty easily just because he can't maintain card advantage without getting his effects. So I win this game because of Shadow Imprisoning Mirror. So game 3, he went first, so he was able to set up. He has a Skarm and a Dante on the field. both in defense mode, and I don't open up with a Hanzo, so I have a set Fiendish Chain, Call of the Haunted, and Shadow Imprisoning Mirror. So I do have the Shadow Imprisoning Mirror, but his next turn, he special summons, I believe, a Graph from his hand in attack mode, and he uses his 2 Burning Abyss monsters to make an Alucard. And at this point, I misplay. I use my Fiendish Chain instead of my Shadow Imprisoning Mirror because I forgot that Alucard was dark. I don't know what I was thinking. But it doesn't actually matter because even if I had used the Shadow Imprisoning Mirror, he had an MST that he could have just chained to the Shadow Imprisoning Mirror. And so after that, he doesn't use the MST on the Fiendish Chain. He just lets me negate the effect. After that, he tributes the Alucard for Mobius, blowing up my Shadow Imprisoning Mirror and Call the Haunted. So if I had used the Shadow Imprisoning Mirror earlier, I would have been able to stop his Mobius from blowing up my Call the Haunted, and his Mobius wouldn't have been able to attack. So I would have been in a little bit better position, but I still probably would have lost, I think. But with my misplay, I just get blown out. He's able to deal almost 5,000 damage in that one turn with his Mobius and Dante. And I have one turn to try to recover, and the only cards I have at that point are Macrocosmos, DD Warrior Lady, and a Solemn Warning. So I don't have anything that can deal with his field. The DD Warrior Lady can take out one of his monsters, but not both of them. So I just lose at that point. 4-2 for my record, and I have to win my last 3 games to top. So in round 7, I go up against back row Monarchs. So he wasn't using the Frog engine. He was using other monsters like the Chaos Dragons and Battle Fader, and he used Soul Exchange to try to get him the tributes. And then he used Royal Decree and March of the Monarchs to try to create lockdowns. And this was particularly problematic. I opened fairly well, and normally I would probably have won with the hand I drew, but he summons a Vanity's Fiend and backs it up with March of the Monarchs. So in this position, the only card in my entire deck that can help me here is Phoenix Wing Windblast to spin March of the Monarchs back to the top of his deck. Otherwise, there's nothing I can do because I can't target his Vanities at all. I can't destroy it with card effects, and I can't special summon, so I can't attack over it either. So I don't draw my out, and I lose. And then game 2, he summons Curse of Anubis, which isn't particularly threatening. The 2 monsters that are the worst are Vanity's Fiend and Majesty's Fiend. So I just summon Apex Avian, and then I attack over the Curse of Anubis. And then I'm able to just negate everything else that he tries to do after that with my Apex Avian's effect. So I win pretty easily that game. And then game 3, this was one of the best games that I had probably. So I open up pretty much perfect. I have the Hanzo to go into first turn Apex Avian. I have a Falcon in hand that I can summon. I open with the field spell, and I have plenty of traps to try to stop his plays. But when I activate Transformation during his standby phase, he chains his in-hand Monarch's Stormforth, and I don't have my Avian on the field yet, so I can't actually negate it, even though I have the field spell. So I actually summon Zephyros instead of Apex Avian, because I know he's just going to tribute it, and Zephyros is actually useful in the grave. So he tribute summons Vanity's Fiend using my Zephyros, and luckily I do have a Fiendish Chain set, so I'm able to turn Vanity's effect off, and he doesn't have a March of the Monarchs at this point. So then the next turn, I summon a Karen Gorgon and attack over his Vanity's Fiend because I have the 50 extra attack. And then his next turn, he summons a Majesty's Fiend, and he has a Decree activated and March of the Monarchs activated when he summons the Majesty's Fiend. So even though I have a Solemn Warning set, I can't actually negate it because of the Decree. So, and then he follows that up with a Regeki, so I can't attack over him. But luckily for me, I have Soul Charge, so I Soul Charge back Karen Gorgon, Upstart Golden Ninja, Hanzo, and Falcon. I summon all of them in defense mode except for the Karen Gorgon, and this way he can only attack over one of my monsters, so I am guaranteed to have 2 monsters on the field next turn when I'm able to attack. So next turn I try to use my Karen Gorgon to attack over his Majesty's Fiend because I have the 50 extra attack, but he has Book of Moon set, so he sets my Karen Gorgon when I attempt to attack. But luckily, I just drew that turn into my MST, so MST is Decree, so my Ninjutsu Art Transformation that I've set is active again, so I'm able to summon my Apex Avian from my deck and attack over his Majesty's Fiend, and at that point I have Apex Avian, Falcon, and the field spell on the field, and I also have Warning set, so there's nothing my opponent can do, and I easily win at that point. And then round 8, I went up against MADOLCHE's, and this was another easy win, mostly because I had Vanity's Emptiness, which totally shut down all of his plays. So game 1, he opens up really well actually. He has a Mageline to search the Angeli, and he plays Chateau and Ticket. But I have the Vanities that I open with, so I use Falcon to attack over his Mageline, allowing him to get the plus, knowing that next turn he'll go for an Angeli play. So on his next turn, I use Vanity's Emptiness on his Angeli, and then he can't do anything, and I just win with Falcon Beatdown. And then game 2, he let me go first, which was honestly a mistake, because I open up Apex Avian plus 4 traps, and he opens Angeli again, but I have Vanities again. On his next turn, he tries to use Chateau plus Hootcake to attack over my Hanzo that I have on the field to turn my Vanities off. But I use my MST to blow up his Chateau, and this destroys the Emptiness, but it makes my Hanzo stronger than his Hootcake, and he already declared the attack at this point, so it has to go through because the monsters on the field are still the same. But he has a Forbidden Lance during the damage step to try to make his Hootcake stronger than my Hanzo, which would allow him to get his Hootcake effect off during his main phase 2, but I can just negate that using my Apex Avian, and then he is down Angeli and Hootcake, and so he doesn't have any monsters left at this point, and he loses 2 turns later, even though I don't have Vanities anymore, just because he doesn't have any monsters and I'm up in card advantage. This guy seemed like he was pretty mentally fatigued at this point, which probably helped contribute to my 2-0 win here. And then so, last round, I go up against the Teller Knights. So, if I win this, I top. If I lose, I probably don't top. Game 1, I honestly don't really remember, mostly because the Game 3 was so intense that it stands out more so in my mind. I remember that I did draw into both Apex Avian and Upstart Golden Ninja this game, and I lost in terms of card advantage, which is pretty bad. You don't want to be down in card advantage with this deck. That's one of the main things you have going for you with ninjas. So game 2, I draw into one of my Light Imprisoned Mirrors, and I force him into bad plays to try to keep up with me throughout this game. And before I activate the Light Imprisoning Mirror, he uses 2 MSTs on my first 2 Ninjutsu Art of Transformations off of my first 2 Hanzos, but I draw into 2 Rotas and 1 Hanzo in this game, so when I summon my 3rd Hanzo and my 3rd Ninjutsu Art of Transformation, he can't stop it anymore. And at this point, he also can't stop my light imprisoning mirror, which I flip up when he tries to activate one of his effects. And with my avian out plus my light imprisoning mirror up, that I'm too far ahead and he can't catch up. So game 3, I draw a little slowly. He sets up a field with both Vanity's Emptiness and a Constellar Omega on the field. So I'm able to get out of this by using both Karma Cut and Fiendish Chain on his Constellar Omega. And after this, Vanity's gets turned off. I don't really remember how, but I think he turned it off. But shortly after this, I'm able to set up my field with Light Imprisoning Mirror, plus Apex Avian and a Falcon on board, so I have 2 negates. And he's able to force out both of my negates using Soul Charge and a 101 that he summons off of a Call of the Haunted and a normal summon from his hand. So the next turn, he is left with only 1 card in hand and 2 set cards on the field. I only have 600 life points left, but I'm able to push him down to 1600 life points that turn. And I actually misplay here. I bounce my set Call of the Haunted to let my Mist Valley Falcon attack, and he Book of Moons my Falcon. If I had bounced my Hanzo, which had already attacked previously that turn, I would have been able to use my set Call of the Haunted to attack him for game. So I end up giving him an extra turn, and during my main phase 2, I set my Vanities, Call of the Haunted, and my Ninjutsu Art of Transformation to put myself in a blowout position for next turn. During his standby phase, I can activate all 3 of them and leave him with no options to play. But his last set card was Full House, so he kills all of my set traps and my Light Imprisoning Mirror and his useless floating Call of the Haunted that he used when he made the 101, which leaves me with no traps. And his 1 card in hand was Altair, so he was able to make a Cowboy and win. So if I would have just bounced my Hanzo to attack, or even if I hadn't set all of my cards, I would have been able to win that game. So that really kind of sucked. So I ended up losing on the bubble, which is frustrating for sure. But I got like 60th out of about 400, which is pretty good considering everyone thinks Ninjas is terrible. I know in the later rounds when I was playing on like board 14 or 15, I was getting a lot of comments and spectators interested in my game just because I was playing Ninjas. So that was pretty cool. And I also got to see one of my friends from my locals down at college. I hadn't seen him in a while, and he ended up topping. He went 7-2, so that was good for him. He was playing Stellar Knights. And with the exception of my opponent round 3, everyone I played against was pretty cool. So I had good conversations with them, and we had a good time. So that's always good. So hopefully next time I'll be able to get my top with my ninja deck. The only thing with that is the next event is the ARG Circuit Series in Chicago, and that's not until the end of November. So that'll be with Cliffords out. So my deck will be way different at that point, so it might not be as good in that format, but the Clifford matchup definitely seems like it'll be a good one. I'm actually more worried about the new Burning Abyss support in terms of causing problems for ninjas. So hopefully you enjoyed this tournament report. For any of you who doesn't want to play anything Duelist Alliance, you should definitely play Ninjas. It's the best deck that is available outside of the new stuff. And also, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out some of my other stuff.